Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me and you're all now self-leaders and ready to take on the day and take on Managing Editor Live. I'm here with Sarah Greesonbach, and I'm very excited about this talk. I mean, in the world of content, your choices are near infinite, and having an ROI perspective about content is the best way to go in my perspective. And Sarah is an expert on this. She is the founder of the B2B Writing Institute, where naturally talented writers learn how to break into business writing, creating punchy marketing content. Since 2013, she's operated the B2B Content Studio, a freelance consultancy that helps agencies in Fortune 500 technology companies in HR, retail, e-commerce, and higher education develop B2B content marketing assets like white papers, thought leadership articles, case studies, and more. Sarah, welcome to Managing Editor Live 2020. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And like you said, I've been working in B2B writing since 2013, and it's always been on the writer's side of the table. So getting to work with some of these really top-notch brands, most recently like Google, ADP, Oracle, I've gotten to see and be a part of some really impressive content initiatives and just that effort people put into it. And just exploring how they do what they do and how they get the most out of the content they're making is something I'm really excited about. So Thank everybody for joining us today. But I think sometimes when it comes to the archive, it's like the content isn't sexy anymore once you hit the publish button. And that really bugs me because I think there's actually a good tie-in to Lori's talk today, which is that taking control of your content archive can really be something that you do, and that builds your reputation as a marketing manager. I don't think there's a study on this, and there never will be, but you know how you just feel better when your apartment is clean or your house is clean? Yes. I really think it's the same way with your content. I think it weighs on you when you know that there's just a lot of junky stuff in there that even if you're getting traffic, you're not really sure it's the best stuff or it's stuff that is doing what you want it to do. So seeing it as this big messy closet where if you just rearrange things sometimes, I think can get you a lot of ROI out of what you've already invested in.
Absolutely.
So the first thing I wanted to do actually is click over to the sweet poll button and start polling. I'd love to get a sense of how big everybody's content archive is, because depending on how old your company is, it could be, you could be just getting started, you could be launching a blog, or you might have just a really beautiful archive already. So if you're near a mouse or keyboard, which I know you are, so you kind of have to do this, which selection most sounds like you? Fewer than 99, 100 to 499 blogs, so under 500, 500 to 1,000, or more than 1,000, which is really enterprise. You've got a busy day. Cool. So I'm seeing a lot in A and B. That's a great feature. I'll give it just a second.
All right. And if you have any questions for Sarah, you can put them in the public chat, or it may be better to put them in the Q&A so we can cover them at the end of the talk.
I love it. So really about, more than half of us have, 100, 500 or fewer blogs, which is a great place to be. I think that makes a lot of sense for if you've been publishing monthly or weekly for the past 2 or 3 years, that puts you right into that segment. And it tells me that everybody already knows why we do content marketing, right? It works. B2B buyers really need information when they're making these complex multi-decision maker purchases. And content provides that perfect mix of technical, narrative, and purchase information. It's the best way to build trust. And since we're operating in a trust economy where every B2B buyer has this really finely tuned BS meter, you just can't put junk out there and expect a C-suite executive to actually read it. It has to be so good that people send their business friends to it and that people want to read it. And that really comes to the 3 reasons, the actual data I have, for why your content archive is such a great place to start. So first, Forrester estimates we've already spent a collective $120 billion in content. It still blows my mind. it's definitely working and driving traffic, but I don't think it's driving as much traffic as it could. Research from Andy Crestodina and Orbit Media reported that blogs that publish daily see almost 130% increase in likelihood of reporting strong results for their content marketing. And when you look at articles that are longer than 3,000 words, there's 116% increase in likelihood of performing and getting strong results. An analysis from the B2B Writing Institute, based on data from SurveyMonkey, Mantis Research, and Orbit Media, showed that some of those top challenges that marketers have in developing this content is being consistent and coming up with ideas. And I really think your content archive is at the center of all of this, and it solves all these problems because it lets you make the most of what you've already invested on. It gives you an easy way to publish more frequently and to create longer content that's still really high quality instead of just going for the word count. And it makes it really easy to be consistent and have ideas because the ideas are already there. You're just picking the best ones to repeat. So today I'm sharing the 3 layers of bringing your archives back to life and help them become ROI pushing investment they're meant to be. But I want to be clear, I'm not a content hoarder at all. New content monthly or weekly is critical to a lot of B2B operations for a couple of reasons. First, that some content is just brand new. So about 15% of Google searches are for completely new terms. So sometimes you just have to put new content out there. We can also layer onto that a few other reasons that content might need to be new. First, with current events, I think we just look at 2020. If you didn't make any adjustments this year, then you probably did some damage to your brand reputation. So that's a great reason to be putting new content out there. Also, your customer is changing. So consider industries like virtual technology, hybrid events. You're getting a lot more interesting to different customer segments. So I really hope you change your content to make the most of that and put some new stuff out. And then finally, with new products, when you add new products, you need to talk about how that product serves and helps and meets this new customer need. So you won't always have archive material that supports that. And you're going to need some new content. But for all of that said, I really think a lot of content just needs some love to be really shiny and new. And I call that a booster shot because it's really taking this perfectly fine skeleton of an article and bringing out its best qualities for readers and the way the internet operates today. On a personal note, it's really painful for me to think of the millions and millions of outdated blog posts out there cluttering up your website and your prospect journey, but also my research for other content. Because as you know, many writers will tell you, when you come across a piece that really makes the point perfectly and that you can use to support all your information, but you find out it's like 10 years old, it's a really big letdown. So I think if your content's older than 1 year, you should have a review process in place to make sure that anyone who lands on it would really be looking at something that you could be proud of. So the first thing I want to break down is which blogs to update. So some of you have more than 1,000 blogs in your archive, which is wonderful, but that is not a weekend project that you're going to actually enjoy. So this is where your marketing superpower that you already have is where you're a master prioritizer. So there's a couple ideas for prioritizing your products. There's really countless ways to do this, but I was going to introduce 5 today. And one secret bonus one, so 6th one that I forgot to put on the slide, but it's my favorite one. So the first thing you could do is prioritize by seasonal timeliness. So related to your product, your industry, what are those times like tax time or the fiscal year, open enrollment, holiday shopping in retail and e-commerce? Just pick up wherever your customers are in time and start putting some muscle behind the content that's in the line of search already. Don't worry as much about last season or what's coming next. Don't worry that everything isn't perfectly in a row or lined up. Just look for what's going to be most relevant this week or next week so that you can really see that happen right away. For the next one, this one is really highly recommended by everybody who I researched on this topic, is choosing those high-performing articles and optimizing them, but also look for related content that's not performing as well as those other ones. When they have the potential to score better, you can focus on that. For the third one, looking at your product. So if you have a product coming up or you're revamping a launch for a product, just dig into your product positioning and identify articles that support each of those use cases or how the product is new. This might not always be something you can do if the product is brand spanking new, but if you're building on existing themes and existing customers you already serve, that might be a good fit. Number 4 up top, we've got the opt-in. So articles that support your most popular downloads, like white papers, case studies, and webinars. This is your customers telling you what they want and what they like to read. So if you can flesh that out by picking up on posts that are related to those topics and putting some supplemental details in there, that's going to really resonate with them. And then the secret one is not on here, but this is 4.5, prioritized by your new hires. And I love when companies do this because it really anchors their expertise and makes the most of this position that they've gone through all this work and investment to bring a new C-suite person in, get their voice out there by updating your old content with it. And you can do this with a short 30 or 60-minute interview. And really, it's a great way to put a new spin on existing content and then dig up some great PR stories that you can use in the future. And then finally, prioritized by the bottom of the funnel instead of working from the top down. This comes right from Growing Convert's recent post where they really thought through this process. But when you are developing content for your funnel, at this point, everybody's doing content marketing. So you could really let your competitors educate your customers and invest in that top part. And then you focus on content that really helps people when they've already decided to buy. And when they're at that phase when they're shopping around, you're going to have the most robust content around that decision. So once you've prioritized some content, maybe you have 10 or 20 articles that you think could really use a touch-up. 10 or 20 is really doable in a quarter, whether you're doing this in-house or with a freelancer. And so now we're going to talk about the actual content itself. What needs to happen on the page to meet today's reader standards. And at the end of this presentation in the supporting documents, there's also a downloadable Word doc that you can customize for what you want to see in your posts. But you can use that with your writing team or freelance writers to really make this process as seamless as possible. And you can just copy that and paste that checklist at the bottom of each post and kind of outsource some of that process. So whenever I'm sitting down to a piece of older content, I'm looking for 3 particular things: relevance, resources, and a reason to read. But a spoiler alert is that this is also what I'm thinking when I sit down to a new piece of content. So when it comes to your archives, you just have a head start with that word count. So to me, relevance answers the questions: who should read this, why this, and why now? And on the page, this often comes down to the headline, which almost always needs to be rewritten, and the introduction, which also almost always needs to be rewritten. Both need new context for the new world and the new customers that you might be talking to. So I'm asking myself, when I scan over this, when I look at this, is the relevance of this article immediately obvious based on the title and the introduction? Who should click through on this, and why should they read it, and why now? What is this going to help them with? What kind of urgency can there be for the reader, not necessarily for you as the marketer, that would make this a really good use of their time? Next, I'm going to be looking at the resources that are used in the piece. B2B buyers love data almost as much as marketers do when they're reading content, but the more neutral the data, the better, from industry analysts like McKinsey & Company or Deloitte, Gartner. But back in the day, we either didn't have access to this data because it was gated and it wasn't published freely, or if we did, that data is now 5 to 10 years old, which really in many industries, especially in technology, is just not helpful for what you're trying to do. And ask any B2B writer, this is where it gets really personal because analysts don't always repeat the same questions within their studies. So it can be really hard to try to boost an article that's written around one study and one response, only to find that it's 10 years old and there's no update to that data. So you really have to dig in and say, does this support any of its points with data? Is this published within the past 2 years, at least within the past 5 years? I think you can make a case if it's within 5 years. Or is it really outdated and really biased and nonspecific? I found is this editorial versus promotional can also be really challenging for marketers in B2B because it feels more urgent to get your product positioning out there and make sure that that's really clear. But the simple truth is that long form doesn't really exist for positioning so much as it exists for building trust and sharing ideas. So while your website copy might be more product focused and positioning focused, the only reason to create thought leadership like longer form and blog articles and white papers is to build trust. And to do that, you really have to leave the tagline at home. The C-suite reader, like I said, the BS meter is just so finely tuned. They're used to Harvard Business Review and Forbes, and it's just really obvious when it's SEO-driven marketing copy. Next, I'm focusing on the body content. So as I scan this article, is there a really clear reason I should read it? Is it practical? Does it provide new ideas or helpful ways to look at things? This is both a formatting thing, because I'm looking for headlines with descriptive and eye-catching phrasing, and I'm also looking for actual content. Is this practical, doable, and not just a regurgitation of the last thing that was syndicated on Fast Company? This is a great reminder as you go to distribute, which we're going to talk about later, but if it isn't good enough for a guest post or syndication, it probably shouldn't be good enough for your blog. So once you have a few pieces that meet today's standards, that's where it gets really fun. And that's where you can put your efforts into getting as many eyes on the content as possible. And in the final section of today's talk, I'm going to break that down into 3 S's of recurring ROI. And that comes down, you can probably guess these, but it's search, supplement, and share. So when we talk about search, talking about SEO, search engine optimization, and depending on your search strategy, this can be a really valuable way to rank for certain keywords or queries. While I've experience with SEO writing, I wanted to bring in my friend Kim for the technical side of things. So Kim is the founder of the SEO and website strategy company Orsana, and she's had some really impressive experiences with helping companies and entrepreneurs update their content archives. So here's a quote from Kim that got me really excited to share her basic SEO strategy, which is that we've seen the simple act of keyword optimization to archives triple traffic in a short period of time for a BDC client. Another client in the B2B manufacturing space increased website rankings by around 700% on target keywords with a thin content consolidation and revision process. In both cases, there was a direct effect on the client's revenue from the increased rankings. How fantastic is that? So when I asked Kim to share a few of the basic steps she takes when she does an SEO audit, this is what she said. And it gets more listy and technical here, but I'd rather think of this as a list of possibilities than a to-do list. So what jumps out at you that you could do over the next few weeks? And what sounds like a good thing to prioritize for your next freelance contractor? But here's what Kim usually covers. So first, she's looking to audit external links to discover and prioritize the most valuable pages. She's also looking at removing irrelevant content because this can help your topical authority. So the goal is to make it really clear to Google what your site is all about so it can direct the right people to you. Restructuring internal links to drive link equity. This is something you definitely want to work with a professional on, because if you redirect all your old links to new structures, that's going to break your website, basically. Revising and optimizing content is a really important part of it, but including those keywords to increase topical relevancy by making them longer and bringing more keywords and longer tail keywords into the process. This is not a good reason to stuff keywords into any piece of content, but it is a good way to make sure that you're strategically using the right words over and over again. Next, marketing updated content for backlinks. So seeing who in your industry would be interested in sharing your content. We'll talk about that more in a minute with sharing, but if you're thinking who would want to share my marketing content, you're really not alone. There's a lot of companies that could be a good partner for you to work with. And then scanning for issues related to indexing, canonical links, and other technical SEO issues. If you dig in and find the SEO is a real opportunity or problem, this is where you'd want to work with a professional. So the second step in the 3 S's of ROI is supplementing your content. This is probably my favorite part, the part where you get to be the most creative. But giving a content a booster shot is the first step. So it brings things up to today's standards. Supplementing your content takes it to that next level where you're really adding value that'll make it more attractive for people to come and read. So because you're taking this basic piece, which is really good, and repurposing it in different formats, you're playing on all the hype and interest in these different mediums like visuals and videos. So hopefully all of you know or follow Ross Simmons, but he's made remixing and redistributing his life work with foundation marketing. And Ross says after creating content for a few months or a few years, you start to build up a reserve of valuable content. And over time, you shouldn't limit these stories to a single format, remix them into new formats for new channels. And the premise of supplementing is to take these 10 or 20 articles and add just one new format to each one. So turn that article into a really simple infographic, highlighting some of that research you've included. Something shareable, easy to look at, and something that could really resonate with somebody or catch their attention at a glance. Most of you probably have a budget for a graphic designer or have one in-house. So you could also test this with a simple tool like PicMonkey. PicMonkey and other design tools have these preloaded infographic templates that are really easy to use and customize the colors. So you can just make it yourself and run them by your creative director to make sure they're on brand and test this out. So some of the options might look like a simple infographic, a YouTube video, a social image, which I've often used as just a screenshot of part of the infographic. So you're really doubling up there. A downloadable PDF, a podcast episode, or on-site audio where you just have a player plug in and upload audio of you reading the blog post for people who prefer to read. LinkedIn updates, maybe from your C-suite, a slideshow deck, a Quora answer, Twitter thread. There's really no limit to what you could do here. And you can literally be the person who invents the next supplement format if you just sit and think about it long enough and try something new. And that's actually something I really admire about managing Editor and Mary Ellen. They're constantly open to innovating and testing and trying new things, even if they're kind of worried if it's going to be weird. So you really can do the same thing with your blog. The last S, the last piece of the puzzle, is sharing your content, because today distribution is really everything. Just wondering why you would put a lot of effort into something that no one will see. And again, that comes back to the writer's experience. It's probably the saddest part of content marketing to me, that you invest in this content. It ends up being a long list of check marks for really high quality writers who put everything they have into an article, but you just move on to the next post in the editorial calendar once the deadline passes. And obviously it's working, but those results are incremental compared to what you can do when you adopt the approach we're talking about here. So for this S, I wanted to capture some of the truly prolific work going on at the HubSpot blog. So this is a team that tackles both the content development side and the distribution side really well. And HubSpot writer Ali Decker says, great content is a waste if your audience doesn't know it exists. Content distribution is an integral part, if not the most important part of your content strategy. And this is why marketing experts at HubSpot and elsewhere apply that 80-20 rule to content. So they'll spend 20% of your time, they'll say spend 20% of your time and budget creating the best possible piece, and then 80% of your time and budget promoting it. And this focus on distribution really speaks to me as a writer and a marketer, because you might think less content is bad news for writers, but in reality, it's so important for people to focus on less but better. And I learned very early on that I'd rather write fewer but better blog articles and white papers, and that's really what the world needs. So it's for many businesses, especially when you have a modest content marketing budget, less is more is a really powerful strategy. Putting $1,000 into one piece that you can promote over and over again for a whole quarter or even a whole year, instead of 5 pieces that might suck in some SEO results, but then really disappoint people when they land on them, is definitely the way to go there. So when it comes to distribution, you have a lot more options than you think you do. So it's not just social and paid social and advertising, though that is on the list here. It's really about creating stuff that's good enough that you could step out there and share it really proudly. So first, auditing your unpaid social media and email newsletter to make sure your content and remixes are actually shared and featured. So actually share your things. Quote your thing, share the image, share other people talking about your thing. And with your newsletter, this gives you a great reason to experiment with segmenting your list. A/B testing your headlines, inviting your audience to check out one piece of content over and over again in new and interesting ways. So for example, you could send the infographic, then the full article, then the audio, customizing the headline for each one. And maybe even customizing sends based on who hasn't opened or who hasn't clicked on it yet, so you aren't overwhelming people who read it the first time around. Next, styling your new content into a kind of a blog launch. So create a 5 to 7 email sequence to re-engage your audience, show them your blog is lively and good to read again, that you've put some work into making your content really up to date. And then looking at partnerships. So this is something people often overlook, because you really are not the only person wondering how to get more eyes on your content. Other brands and marketing managers are wondering how to do this too. And people are really surprisingly willing to get creative and collaborate with non-competitive brands. I've also seen these kinds of ideas come from voice of the customer research. So next time you do a survey or NPS, throw in a question sometime about what other products and tools your customers are using. And then you could use that as a warm introduction to reach out to somebody else to collaborate. And then finally, don't shy away from paid content. So there are freelance ads managers and even bootcamp style courses that can level up your skills for lead generation with this medium, especially if there's a tie into a particular company you're targeting with an accounts-based marketing program. You can do some really fancy stuff with LinkedIn and Facebook with paid distribution. So I spoke as quickly as I could because I was worried I was going to finish over my time, but we have about 5 minutes left for Q&A, and I'm really thrilled to talk with you guys today, especially following Lori's amazing talk. There's another lineup today. I think Ruthie is speaking at 4 p.m. with a related topic, really focusing on the ROI of content marketing. So I highly recommend you guys check that out.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much. Great talk. So I guess my first question is about your secret method of updating bottom of the funnel content. Could you talk about that a little bit more? Like, how do you choose the content to update? Is it based on conversion? Like, what is your approach there?
Yeah, I think, it really blends with the thought of identifying your best opt-ins and seeing how you can expand around that content. Because if you have something that people are already interested in downloading, the odds are that was not the only thing about that thing that they want to read for the rest of their lives. So if you could fill that in and really speak to people who understand that they have a problem and have identified the potential solutions for it and are really just looking around for the best one for them, and then focus on things that speak to those unique problems and how your product fits that.
Got it. What mistake do content marketers make when sort of implementing this plan that you've laid out in terms of content archive update? Is there a big mistake or pitfall that you see again and again?
Yeah, there is a huge egg chicken thing with holistic thinking and planning and taking action. Because on the one hand, you really need a plan to be moving through things consistently and making sure you're making progress towards an actual goal. But you can't let that big plan keep you from taking action and, pick 5 posts and assign 1 a week, and actually move forward with this. So I think sticking with a plan long enough and then acting on it is probably the biggest challenge, because there's just so many competing priorities. And I think that's something it's extremely natural to struggle with, but something that you have to push through.
Shauna has a great question, and I know that SEO is not necessarily your expertise, though you do have a fluency in it. And she asked, do you have any tips for identifying long tail keywords in terms of updating your content archive?
Yeah, I would definitely go to an SEO professional for that kind of specific question. But from the writer's perspective, I use Google Keywords a lot, where it'll have a keyword discovery tool where you can plug in maybe your product or your industry or something related to what you're trying to write about. And it'll actually suggest and show you related searches around what you're looking for. And it has a short and long tail keyword option.
Absolutely. And Shauna, I'd
so
also
that's
say
the best way to...
Yeah, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, just that's a great way to discover things, which is part of that 15% of new Google searches thing.
So also, Shauna, we do have an SEO session, and just on the RepCap side, we use Raven tools a lot. And if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of SEO, I'll be talking about that a little bit in the content marketing stack presentation later on. But Sarah, thank you so much this is a great session. Thank you everyone for the questions, and we are almost at time, so I'll give you enough time to move on to your next session, unless there's anything else, Sarah, you'd like to add before we go.
No, this is great. I've just the download for the slides is available, and then the handout for working through your content archive is available too. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.